They say the mountains only whisper to those who know how to listen. But on the night Elias heard the knock, it wasn't a whisper. It was desperation. And when he opened his door and saw what the darkness had left on his doorstep, the quiet life he'd built in the wilderness shattered in a single trembling breath. Elias had grown used to silence, not the gentle, peaceful kind, but a deep, weighted quiet that settled into the bones of anyone who lived alone long enough. His cabin perched against the slope of Pine Ridge Mountain like a stubborn thought that refused to be erased. For 2 years he'd lived there, surviving on what he caught, fixed, or bartered in town. People called him that mountain boy, a little strange but harmless. They didn't know that silence wasn't his preference. It was his shield. And in the mountains, shields were easy to build, easier still to hide behind. Every morning, Elias woke before dawn, lit the stove, and stepped outside to the cold bite of the high-altitude wind. He hunted rabbits, chopped firewood, tended his makeshift garden, and repaired worn tools with the patience of someone who had nowhere else to be. His life was predictable, quiet, and safe. Safe mattered. Safe meant his past stayed where it belonged, buried beneath memories he never intended to revisit. What he didn't expect was how quickly the mountains could refuse that safety, or how effortlessly one strange night could pull him back into feeling something he believed had long died. On the evening everything changed. Pine Ridge was drowning in fog so thick Elias could barely see the trees 10 feet from his porch. The air felt charged, like the forest was holding its breath. He'd spent the day repairing fence posts on the south edge of his property, and by the time he returned to the cabin, he felt the exhaustion settle deep into his muscles. He ate a simple meal, fed the fire, and listened to the strange stillness outside. Even the owls were quiet. He didn't like it. Silence was comforting, but unnatural silence meant something was wrong. Elias lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows breathe with every flicker from the stove. He couldn't shake the sensation that he wasn't alone, like the forest outside was watching him, waiting. Sometime after midnight, when the fog had thickened into a damp curtain around the cabin, he finally drifted towards sleep. That was when he heard it, a soft, uncertain scrape against the porch, then another. Slow, hesitant, not the scurrying of a fox or the padding of a deer. Something smaller in movement, yet heavier in presence, like whatever was out there carried fear with its steps. Elias sat up instantly. In the mountains, sound meant survival. He grabbed his lantern, pulled on his boots, and reached for the fire poker, his closest thing to a weapon. His breath came shallow as he approached the door. The scrape sounded again, closer, something lightly brushing against the wood, followed by a faint, trembling whimper. It was the kind of sound an injured animal makes when it has nowhere else to go. His heart hammered. He should ignore it. That was the rule of the mountains. Don't involve yourself in the forest's business. But something fragile in that sound made him freeze. He hesitated with his hand on the doorknob. What if it was a predator feigning distress? Mountain lions were cunning. Wolves too. Yet the whimper, if it was an act, it was the most human imitation he'd ever heard. He swallowed hard, tightened his grip on the lantern, and pulled the door open. Cold air rushed in. For a moment, he saw nothing but fog curling across the porch. Then the lantern light reached downward, and his entire world narrowed. Curled tightly near the doorframe was a creature he only knew from myths, smaller than expected, shaking violently, bleeding. A young Bigfoot. The creature's amber eyes flicked up at him, wide, terrified, shimmering with pain. Its fur was matted with dirt, clotted blood, and needles from the forest floor. One leg was twisted unnaturally beneath its body, and when Elias lowered the lantern, he saw the cause. A steel trap, old and rusted, clamped around its ankle with brutal force. Blood seeped with every tremor. Elias felt his stomach twist. He hated traps, cowards' tools, banned for decades, but still used by poachers with no regard for suffering. Someone had placed one on his land, and this small creature had paid the price. For a long moment, Elias and the creature simply stared at each other. Every instinct told him to back away, shut the door, pretend he hadn't seen this. If there were adults nearby, if they sensed him touching their young, the thought alone chilled him. Bigfoots were territorial, enormous, capable of tearing apart a human without effort. But the trembling form on his porch didn't look capable of harm. It looked scared, alone, and Elias knew that feeling too well. Against all reason, the part of him that had sealed itself away for years cracked open. He crouched slowly, keeping his movements gentle. The creature flinched but didn't attempt to flee. Not that it could with the trap crushing its leg. Elias whispered, "Easy. I won't hurt you." The creature blinked, chest heaving. When Elias reached for the trap's release mechanism, its lips curled in a weak, warning snarl. He paused. "I'm trying to help." His voice trembled despite himself. Perhaps the creature sensed his fear, or his sincerity, because it finally exhaled in a shaky huff and loosened its posture. Elias nodded once, steadying himself, and reached for the rusted iron jaws. The trap resisted him. Years of rust had fused some of the hinges, making it nearly impossible to pry apart. Elias gritted his teeth, braced his foot against the wooden porch, and pushed with all his strength. The metal groaned, the creature whined, and his arms trembled with effort. For a moment, he thought he wouldn't manage it. Then, with a harsh metallic snap, the trap sprang open. The creature gasped, a sound so startlingly human it made Elias's chest tighten. Its leg immediately folded beneath it, and it would have collapsed if Elias hadn't caught it. He was struck by its warmth, by the weight of its small frame, surprisingly light for a creature of legend. It trembled violently in his arms, too weak to stand. Elias hesitated only a second before lifting it fully off the ground. The creature didn't struggle. It curled instinctively against him, like something exhausted past resistance. He carried it inside, kicking the door shut behind him. The fire cast a warm glow across the room, chasing away the damp chill. Elias set the creature gently onto a thick blanket near the stove. It lay curled, shivering, but alive. Elias worked quickly. He gathered clean water, cloth, herbal salves, and bandages. The creature watched him through half-lidded eyes, cautious, weary, but trusting enough to let him near. As he cleaned the wound, it winced and whimpered, each sound stabbing at him with unexpected guilt. He murmured soothing words without thinking, the way he once had when comforting someone else, someone he no longer allowed himself to remember. By the time he finished bandaging the injured ankle, sweat beaded his forehead. The creature blinked slowly, its breathing settling, as if relief had finally found it. He sat back on the floorboards, studying it. The creature was unlike the monstrous silhouettes described in local legends. This one was small, barely reaching his chest when sitting upright. Its face, though covered in coarse fur, had an undeniable intelligence, curiosity mixed with fear. Elias wondered how long it had been trapped, how far it had crawled to reach his cabin, why it had chosen him. The thought unsettled him. He wasn't someone creatures sought. He was a boy who hid from the world, not one who rescued anything, least of all something mythical. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. Elias stood and bolted the door, suddenly uneasy. If this young one belonged to a family, they would come searching. Would they be grateful or furious? He didn't know. He returned to the creature's side. Its breathing had steadied. Its eyes drifted shut, exhaustion overtaking pain. Elias exhaled slowly, studying the gentle rise and fall of its chest. He felt something unfamiliar bloom in his ribs. A quiet ache, not unpleasant, but unsettling. Responsibility. Connection. Things he thought the mountains had stripped from him permanently. He poured himself a cup of water and sat near the stove, staring into the flames. What had he done? Saving the creature was the right thing, but the consequences could be enormous. If the forest ranger discovered a Bigfoot here, he'd report it immediately. Scientists would swarm. Hunters, too. The creature would be taken, studied, locked away. Elias felt his stomach twist. He wouldn't let that happen. Not after what the world had done to the last vulnerable thing he'd failed to protect. Not again. He couldn't bear another loss, even if this was a creature of legend. Hours passed. The fire dimmed. The fog thinned outside. But Elias couldn't sleep. Every sound made him twitch, expecting heavy footsteps, expecting a shadow to move across the window. But none came. The creature slept peacefully, curled into the blanket like a wounded pup. Elias realized, with a strange jolt, that he didn't know its age. For all he knew, young for a Bigfoot could mean anything. Weeks, months, years. He wondered what its parents were like, if they were gentle or dangerous, if they were searching or grieving. The uncertainty gnawed at him. Around dawn, the creature stirred, blinking groggily as light seeped into the cabin. Its gaze moved from the stove to Elias, studying him with slow, deliberate curiosity. Elias froze, unsure how to act. The creature pushed itself upright, winced at the pain, then settled back down. It made a soft churr sound, something between a hum and a purr. Elias didn't know what it meant, but it didn't sound like fear. He nodded slightly. "You're safe," he murmured. The creature blinked once, then lowered its head onto its arms, accepting his words more easily than he accepted them himself. He brought it water in a small wooden bowl. The creature sniffed, hesitated, then drank shakily. Elias felt warmth spread through him as he watched. It trusted him enough to drink. That meant something. Something dangerous. Something binding. He set the bowl aside and checked the bandage. The bleeding had slowed, but the wound was deep. It would take days, maybe weeks, to heal. He couldn't risk the creature wandering back into the forest injured, and he couldn't risk someone in town noticing strange tracks around his cabin. For now, he had no choice but to hide it. The creature shifted suddenly and let out a low, mournful sound that made Elias's chest tighten. It sounded like calling, like searching for someone who wouldn't answer. Elias swallowed. "I know," he whispered. He didn't know why he said it. He didn't know what he was promising, but he felt the weight of responsibility settle on him like a second skin. He glanced toward the woods through the window. If there were adult Bigfoots nearby, they would soon realize one of their own was missing. And then the mountains, his mountains, would no longer be quiet. As morning light washed over the cabin, Elias sat beside the injured creature, watching its breathing even out again. He didn't know what came next. He didn't know how to keep it safe, or how to protect himself from whatever would come searching. But he knew this. The moment he opened his door that night, his life had changed. Not because he'd found a creature of myth, but because something in him, long dormant, had woken up. Something that refused to let the small Bigfoot suffer alone. And in the mountains, awakening anything came with consequences. The forest woke before Elias did. A hollow echo drifted through the trees, low, resonant, vibrating the cabin walls like a deep warning drum. Elias sat upright instantly, heart thudding. The creature still slept curled on the blanket, its small chest rising and falling in steady waves. But the sound outside was not steady. It came in intervals, long and mournful, like a call being answered across great distance. Elias moved to the window quietly. Mist clung to the pines. Something enormous shifted in the shadows far below the ridge. The mountain wasn't silent anymore. Someone was searching. Elias felt sweat prick his palms. If the creature's family was out there, he couldn't let them find it like this, injured, helpless, inside a human home. They might see him as a threat, or worse, prey. He glanced at the creature. It slept through the echoing calls, too weak to respond. Elias knelt beside it, whispering low, "I need you to wake up." The creature only shivered in its sleep. He couldn't move it far. Its leg wouldn't hold. Hiding it suddenly felt impossible, but leaving it was unthinkable. He realized then, the choice he made last night was binding. He gathered blankets, spare clothes, and a few tools, packing them into the corner beneath the floorboards with the quiet urgency of someone burying evidence. The creature groaned as he lifted it slightly, enough to tuck another blanket under its body. Its eyes fluttered, but didn't fully open. Elias hated himself for the fear knotting in his chest. Not fear of the creature, but fear for it. He didn't know what its kind did to protect their young. He only knew what humans did when threatened. And humans were far easier to understand than whatever roamed those woods. By mid-morning, the calls had grown closer. Elias stepped outside, careful not to let the door creak. Frost cracked beneath his boots. In the distance, between trunks and fog, he glimpsed something massive moving, taller than any bear, broader than any elk. A shape stepped into a pocket of pale light, a silhouette like a boulder on legs, draped in thick fur. An adult Bigfoot. The sight rooted Elias to the ground. It stood still, head tilted upward as if scenting the air. Elias ducked behind a stump, holding his breath, praying the creature inside didn't make a sound. The adult turned slightly, revealing a deep scar across its shoulder. Old, healed long ago. It sniffed the wind, exhaled a rumbling growl, then continued down the ridge. Elias watched until the forest swallowed it whole. His pulse pounded painfully. This wasn't an imagined threat. These beings were real, intelligent, and now fully aware that one of their own was missing. The ranger would likely hear the calls too, if he came investigating. Elias clenched his jaw. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything the creature had endured. The forest wasn't the only danger on this mountain. Inside, the creature had managed to sit up. Its amber eyes met Elias's with fragile recognition. It let out a soft noise, questioning, uneasy. Elias crouched beside it. "Your family's looking for you," he murmured. The creature's breath quickened. It wasn't fear he saw. It was longing. Painful, desperate longing. Elias's throat tightened. "I'll help you, but you can't make a sound when anyone comes near. Understand?" The creature blinked slowly, as if absorbing the tone more than the words. When Elias gently touched its shoulder, it didn't flinch. A silent understanding passed between them, thin but real. Shortly after noon, The crunch of boots approached from down the trail, steady, heavy, unmistakably human. Elias's stomach twisted. The ranger. He recognized that gait, that rhythm. Ranger Hale always walked like a man convinced every inch of forest belonged to him. Elias dragged the blanket over the creature, then hurried to the door, forcing his breathing steady. Hale knocked twice, firm, authoritative. Elias opened the door halfway, blocking the inside with his body. Hale gave him a curt nod, scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes honed by years of tracking. "You heard anything strange this morning?" Elias shrugged, keeping his expression flat. "Fog carries sounds weird up here." It wasn't a lie, but not the truth either. Hale narrowed his eyes slightly. "There's something big moving through the ridge. Footprints larger than any bear I've ever tracked." He paused, lowering his voice. "And traps. Illegal ones. You seen anything like that?" Elias forced neutrality. "Not lately." Hale's gaze drifted toward the house. "You mind if I come in? Want to check something?" Elias blocked the doorway without hesitation. "Cabin's a mess. You can check the ridge instead. East side. Lots of signs there." The ranger studied him a moment too long. Elias felt heat crawl up his neck but stayed still. Finally, Hale grunted. "You should be careful, kid. Something's off today." He stepped back from the porch. "If you hear or see anything unusual, anything, you let me know." Elias nodded without breathing. Hale turned and disappeared into the trees. Elias waited until the last echo of footsteps faded before closing the door, exhaling shakily. The creature peeked from beneath the blanket, eyes wide with worry. Elias ran a hand through his hair. "We can't stay here," he whispered. He knew what had to be done. The creature's family was searching. The ranger was searching. And the mountain itself felt tense, alive with movement. Staying in the cabin would put them both in danger. Elias packed quickly: food, water, bandages, a small axe, a blanket strong enough to carry the creature if its leg worsened. The creature watched him quietly, as if understanding the urgency. When he approached, it reached out a trembling arm, fingers brushing the floor. For balance, he helped it stand. It swayed, but didn't fall. Determination radiated from its shivering body. Moving was slow. Elias supported most of the creature's weight, guiding it across the cabin toward the back exit, a small door that opened toward a narrow trail hidden from the main path. Every step sent a jolt through the creature's injured leg, but it didn't cry out. Its quiet bravery unsettled Elias in a way he couldn't explain. He'd known people stronger than him, who'd broken down from less pain. Yet this small being kept going, trusting him blindly. That trust felt heavier than the creature itself, a responsibility he never asked for but couldn't turn away from. Outside, the forest was colder than before. The fog thinned but refused to lift completely, drifting between trees like restless spirits. Elias glanced behind him repeatedly, half expecting to see Hale's silhouette reappear, or the massive shape of an adult Bigfoot looming from the mist. But the forest remained still. The only sound was the creature's uneven breathing and Elias's steady footsteps along the hidden trail. He didn't know exactly where he was going, only that the farther they got from his cabin, the safer the creature might be. The mountain would not offer second chances. After nearly an hour, they reached a rocky overhang overlooking the lower valley. Here, Elias finally let the creature rest. It sank to the ground with a heavy exhale, leaning against a boulder. Elias crouched beside it, checking the bandage. The bleeding hadn't worsened, but the injury was deep. It wouldn't heal fast. The creature lifted its gaze to him, eyes soft but sorrowful. Elias felt something inside him tug painfully at the sight. "You miss them," he whispered. The creature blinked once, slow and deliberate. Elias swallowed. "We'll find them, but not yet. Not until it's safe." A sudden snap echoed through the trees. Elias tensed instantly. Branches rustled. Heavy steps approached. Not human, not cautious. The creature's eyes widened with recognition. It let out a small, involuntary sound. Elias pressed a finger to its lips, shaking his head, but the creature's gaze stayed fixed on the trees, not in fear, but hope. Elias turned slowly. Through the fog, a massive shape emerged. The same adult Bigfoot he'd seen earlier, scarred, towering, powerful. It stood 20 yards away, chest rising with deep, controlled breaths. Its dark eyes locked onto the smaller creature beside Elias and softened. Elias didn't move, didn't breathe. The adult stepped closer, each massive stride shaking the earth beneath them. The young creature reached out a trembling arm. Elias felt his pulse hammering as the adult's shadow engulfed them. But instead of aggression, the giant knelt. Slow, cautious, gentle. It examined the bandaged leg with a low rumble that sounded heartbreakingly mournful. The small creature whimpered and leaned into it. Elias watched, unblinking, overwhelmed by the tenderness of the moment. This wasn't a monster. This was a parent who'd been searching for its child with the desperation only love could fuel. The adult lifted its head and looked at Elias. Really looked. Its gaze was ancient, intelligent, and terrifying in its depth. Elias's breath hitched. He felt exposed, not physically, but emotionally, like the creature could see the cracks in him, the loneliness, the fracture that drove him to live alone on a mountain. The adult extended one massive hand, palm open. Not a threat, a gesture. Elias hesitated, heart racing. Then, slowly, he placed his hand against its palm. The creature's skin was warm, rough, alive. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, heavy and indescribable. The forest shifted suddenly behind them. Another set of footsteps, lighter, quicker. Elias turned sharply, expecting another Bigfoot. Instead, Ranger Hale stepped out of the trees, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes widening at the scene unfolding. He froze, stunned, silent. Elias sprang to his feet. "Don't!" he warned, voice breaking. Hale's gaze darted from Elias to the towering adult Bigfoot, then to the injured young one. His fingers twitched near the rifle strap. The adult rose slowly, placing itself between Hale and its child, but not attacking. Its posture wasn't violent. It was protective. Hale's voice cracked. "Elias, what is this?" Elias stepped forward, blocking Hale's line of fire. "Not a threat," he said, breath trembling, "just trying to protect its own." Hale shook his head in disbelief. "This thing could kill you." Elias glared at him, "And yet it hasn't." Hale tightened his jaw. "We need to call this in." "No." The word came out raw. "If you report them, they'll be hunted, caged, studied. They're not animals. They're family." Hale hesitated, torn between duty and the undeniable truth in front of him. The forest waited in tense silence. Finally, Hale lowered his rifle. Not fully, but enough. "You're asking me to ignore everything I'm sworn to do," he murmured. Elias nodded slowly. "I'm asking you to see what's right instead of what's easy." Hale's shoulders sagged. The adult Bigfoot rumbled softly, a sound not meant for intimidation, but gratitude. Hale exhaled. "Fine. But this stays between us. You understand?" Relief flooded Elias's chest. He nodded once. Hale stepped back, giving space. The adult lifted the young creature gently into its arms, holding it close. The small one reached toward Elias with a soft, plaintive sound. Elias stepped closer, placing a steady hand against the young creature's shoulder. "You'll be okay," he whispered. The creature pressed its forehead lightly to his, a gesture so tender it stole his breath. The adult watched with solemn understanding, then turned and disappeared into the trees with its child held safely against its chest. The forest swallowed them. Elias stood motionless, heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. Hale approached quietly. "You did something big today," he said. Elias shook his head. "No, I just didn't let something small stay alone." And for the first time in years, the mountain felt alive again, not with danger, but with purpose.